should you buy? And which players should you sell before week 11 of the fantasy football season? What's going on, football fans and fantasy freaks? It's Mitch here, back with another week of fantasy football trade advice. It's buy low, it's sell high for week 11. Which players should you get rid of and which players should you trade for? Preparing for a playoff push. That's exactly the intent behind this video. I'm trying to win you a championship. So I'm looking at schedules at this time of the year. I'm looking at players that are going to play their best ball in December to win you a fantasy championship. So if you want to win a fantasy championship, spike the like button and subscribe to OwnersBox Fantasy for weekly buy low, sell high videos just like this. Let's get that championship. This week on OwnersBox, there's an awesome exclusive deal to new users. So if you haven't already signed up to OwnersBox, guys, now is the time, because we're giving away 500 free player pick entries only to new users who sign up this week. Player picks is kind of like a more or less props game. It's super easy to play and super easy to win, just like your fantasy championships with my advice, right? Use the code PP100 and you'll get a free $100 player picks entry when you deposit $10 or more. The link is in the description and at that pinned comment. So use the code PP100 on OwnersBox. Let's get started with our buy low, sell high candidates, beginning as always with our buy lows. It's your last chance to trade for Nico Collins. If you didn't draft Nico Collins, I hope you did. If you didn't draft Nico Collins, you still have a chance to acquire Nico Collins for the fantasy championship, because he's probably going to be on a few fantasy championship teams. Why? Because Nico Collins is a dog. D-A-W-G. He is a dog. Nico Collins is one of the best football players on earth right now, and I don't know if everyone realizes this, but he was leading the NFL by like over 100 yards before he got hurt in receiving yards, more than Jamar Chase, right? He's actually the leading separator in the sport. He's big, he's strong, he's physical, he's fast, and he has CJ Stroud throwing him the ball, hunting for a playoff spot and seeding in the AFC. Nico is going to feast down the stretch. Now, the only negative about Nico is you should have probably traded for him like a week or two ago, because he's going to be back on Monday Night Football, a primetime game that everyone's going to be excited for. He's going to play the Cowboys. He's going to score a lot of points. That's probably what's going to happen, right? So you want to aim to get him before that game. The other negative is that he has a week 14 bye week. So if you're somebody that needs to probably have Nico Collins in your lineup, or the players that you need to use to acquire Nico in week 14 because you're like a fringe playoff guy, maybe you don't go out and send a super crazy offer. But if you're like first to like fourth seed in your league and you're pretty positive you're going to make the playoffs, the way it sets up, and even check out your opponent in week 14 and see how many bye weeks he has, see how many players he has, right? Try to check that out. Nico is that type of owner's player, in my opinion, because week 14 bye can be a big kind of wrench into everything. But you look at the matchups, he does play Dallas, Tennessee, Jacksonville leading up to the bye week. He should go absolutely off against Dallas and Jacksonville, and has a chance against Tennessee now that their corners are just dropping like flies as well, so their pass defense is not quite the same. I would also just expect, given the lack of success from Stroud in recent weeks and the lack of success from the Texans offensively, they're just going to feature this guy to an even greater degree, because they have realized how much they need him in their offense. And he really is the engine. Like, he's the guy that gets drives going. He's the third down chain mover. He's the yards after catch guy. He's the downfield target. And even in games later in the season where they take on in the playoffs, like the Chiefs do have a great defense, but that's going to be a big game in the AFC. And honestly, like, this guy is so good that he's just basically schedule proof. Like, the Chiefs, even Trent McDuffie, I would still start Nico Collins and still expect like 80 to 100 yards and a touchdown. Like, he's kind of in that category alongside Jefferson and Chase, where it just really doesn't matter who he's playing. And then the big one is in week 17, he actually plays the Ravens, who are the worst team in the league against receivers. Ask Jamar Chase. So if you get to your fantasy final and you have Nico Collins on your team, he's probably going to help you win a championship. So that's why I would look to acquire Nico Collins. He's a beast. He's going to be back. It was a hamstring injury. He had an extra week, actually, on top of what was expected to repair and to get back. And I expect him to thrive for the rest of the season as a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy football. The second player that I would buy low on is Jayden Reed of the Green Bay Packers. Reed of the Packers just finished his bye week, so it's a great opportunity because people probably forgot about Packers players or undervaluing Packers players. The last time we saw the Packers and Reed, it was against the Lions in a sloppy rain game where the Packers looked awful and Love looked terrible, and he threw the ball like Will Levis to the other team for a touchdown, and Reed was relatively quiet. You know, overall in that game, I mean, he had 100 yards, I think, but it was only on like 4 catches or something like that. And he's been a little bit up and down as of late. He's had multiple quarterbacks, all that sort of stuff. If I'm targeting anyone in Green Bay at wide receiver, it's probably Reed. And the reason I like the Packers offense for the rest of the year is because I could see it being very much like last year, where the Packers they're okay, you know, before the bye week. Then Matt LaFleur makes his tweaks. Jordan Love gets a little bit healthier in the bye week. And then they start to kind of take off as an offense and as a team as LaFleur kind of unlocks Love and the rest of the offense. Now, he does face some difficult matchups in the next couple of weeks, like Chicago, San Francisco, and Miami. All of these teams are very good against the pass. But then after that is where I really love him for your fantasy playoffs. He plays Detroit, who he just had 100 yards against, and they're one of the worst teams in terms of defending receivers. Seattle, who it's kind of been a bad defense all year. Saints, who have given up. The Vikings, who he's had great games against regularly, dating back to last year. Those teams all are bottom 10 against wide receivers this season. I love Reed in this offense down the stretch because the Packers actually low-key, they can't afford to drop like 3 or 4 games, or they might actually risk missing the playoffs, which is something that I never really considered. But he is going to be a main part of this offense down the stretch as Jordan Love looks to get going. So Reed of the Packers is my second buy low. Mike Evans is my third buy low. We've discussed Evans in these videos before, but I thought it's been a couple weeks, I believe, since I brought him up. Let's bring him up again because right now the Bucs are on the bye week, so it gives you plenty of opportunity now and next week, depending on your trade deadline, that you need to look to trade for him because trade deadlines are coming up. So you're looking for guys that you can secure for that playoff run and playoff push. Mike Evans wants to come back for week 12, which would be right after his bye week against the Giants, in a game that I think he would thrive because the Giants don't have a great CB1 to cover Mike Evans. But even if he misses that Giants game, for the rest of the year, he plays beautiful matchups. Okay, Carolina twice, not once, twice. Dallas and Las Vegas. He also plays the Chargers, which is the most difficult matchup, but even the Chargers don't have a corner that can cover Mike Evans. Evans also will have the benefit of no Chris Godwin once he comes back, which makes him by far the number 1 target for Baker Mayfield. A Baker Mayfield who is leading the NFL in passing touchdowns. So yes, Mike Evans is still Mike Evans. We saw this earlier in the year. He's a red zone monster, and he likely will see more targets once he returns and will be more featured in the game plan in the offense and maybe even be in the slot more because there's no Chris Godwin. So he's going to get more receptions as well. Love him for the rest of the season, especially considering the matchups. So trade for Mike Evans. Another player on the Bucs that I would also consider trading for is Bucky Irving, the rookie running back. Again, he's on a bye week, so there's plenty of time and opportunity to make this happen. He has great matchups, like Evans. These defenses are just bad in general. Dallas, Carolina twice, Las Vegas. These are bottom 7 defenses against running backs this season. And best of all, he plays Dallas and Carolina in week 16 and week 17. 2 of the worst run defenses in football. What I also love about Irving is you're seeing the ascension of Irving within the offense. 18 points, 16 points, 17 points, 15 points in 4 of his last 5 games. On top of that, we're also seeing a greater role for the Bucs running backs just in general. Like Rachaad White's involved, Irving's involved, White more so as a receiver, Irving more so as a ball carrier, but it's clear and evident that Bucky is the more explosive, agile, elusive running back, and he just does more with his touches. So the more that he proves this, the more he's going to become a great running back. I just love this Bucs offense. I think the O-line's underrated, considering Tristan Wirfs should come back soon. Liam Cohn has done a great job mixing in the run, the pass, and the screen game, in which he does a great job of featuring running backs in yards after catch opportunities. Irving's excellent in that role. So I really like him down the stretch. I think he's kind of a underrated back that you can get. Potentially you could sell off, maybe a big-time running back name that has a more difficult schedule for Bucky and another player, depending on what your roster looks like. But he's definitely somebody that I think is being slept on overall, because there's always that Rachaad White kind of hanging over your shoulder. But right now, both running backs have been pretty effective in fantasy. I would lean towards Bucky being the guy moving forward more so than White. Our 5th and final buy low player is Kyler Murray at the quarterback position. I wanted to throw a quarterback in here because there's 2 quarterbacks in my sell list. So I wanted to throw a quarterback that you could maybe trade for in return for one of these quarterbacks. Kyler Murray has played the most difficult stretch of his schedule in 2024. And in that stretch, he still had 4 20-point performances in fantasy football, which is extremely impressive, right? He played a really tough stretch. Now he goes on a stretch where he's going to face Seattle twice. He faces New England, Carolina, and the Rams during the fantasy playoffs, which is pretty beautiful. And, the Vikings in that stretch as well, which is more difficult. But other than Minnesota, he gets a bunch of top 10 great matchups for the quarterback position. The Rams in that week 17 could be a shootout. Carolina is just a bad defense. New England, I think, is a little bit of an overrated defense. And it's also, I think, in Arizona. So Arizona should have full control. Seattle, I could see both those games being shootouts. So now is the time to buy Kyler, because he's just coming off a stretch where, he played really well against the Jets, and that's unfortunate, but he's on a bye week. So wait a little bit, right? Maybe see if you can give, if the owner for Kyler needs a player at tight end and you've got 2 tight ends, or he needs a player at his flex spot and he really needs a player, and you're like, well, my quarterback could use an upgrade. I really don't know about my quarterback right now. Like, it's kind of shaky and I don't love the schedule down the stretch. Maybe I could get like Kyler for a flex type of receiver, or I have depth at running back or something like that. You understand what I'm saying? So Kyler Murray is the type of guy that I would be targeting at quarterback, because he's not too expensive, but he's also like very, very reliable for a QB1 in your fantasy playoffs, and he has great potential due to the schedule. So he's the perfect buy low at this quarterback position for the rest of the season. My sell high players for week number 11. First, I'm going to go with Isaiah Pacheco. This is kind of a name that I haven't seen floated out there by too many people, because more people are going to say Kareem Hunt. But I think Kareem Hunt is honestly too obvious. I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh, Kareem Hunt, once Pacheco comes back, Kareem Hunt's going to be irrelevant. And he was only signed to take over for Isaiah Pacheco. That's my stupid fantasy owner voice, right? I actually think that both these running backs will be fairly relevant given the amount that the Chiefs run the ball. And I could actually see Hunt remaining the starter for at least 3 to 4 more weeks. And I could also see Hunt being the main ball carrier in the red zone, as that is kind of what he's better at. He's a bigger bowling ball of a back, and he's better in short yardage, while Pacheco is more of a change of pace, explosive running back. That being said, when we look at Pacheco, the reason I would trade him is, one, I think Kareem Hunt will stick around as a option in the offense, Pacheco is seen as the starter, although we're not exactly sure if he actually is, right? Kareem Hunt is the healthy guy. He's been involved in the offense when it's seen more success. Also, okay, Pacheco, these upcoming weeks, and the Chiefs in general, Kareem Hunt in general, has a better schedule early. So Buffalo this week, Carolina, and the Raiders the next 3 weeks. Those are all top 10 matchups for running backs. But that's the time where Pacheco, he was just activated off IR. He's going to be working his way back. He's not going to play against Buffalo. And then against Carolina and the Raiders, he might play, but he might not also play. Like, he might not be ready yet. So those are the 3 matchups where Kareem Hunt should thrive in all 3 of those games. But then after he's gearing up to return through those 3 weeks, you got Los Angeles Chargers, you got Cleveland, Houston, and Pittsburgh. So those are all difficult matchups for running backs. So I would look to sell both Hunt and Pacheco, but if I were to choose, I would actually rather have Hunt for these next 3 weeks than a large majority of running backs, given how he's played and the consistency he's shown in the offense. And then I'd probably trade Pacheco, to be honest with you, because I don't really know if I want both on my team, and I don't really want either on my team in the playoffs because it's difficult matchups and an unknown backfield. So I'd rather sell both, but I'd keep Hunt if you're a guy that needs the push for the playoffs. If you're like 5-5 or 4-6 or 6-4 and you need to win these next 3 weeks, I would keep Hunt, but I would sell Pacheco. You understand what I'm saying? All right, so sell Pacheco regardless. Sell him high because people will want him because he's on the Chiefs. He's seen as the starting running back, and he's Isaiah Pacheco. All right, he runs cool. Our second sell high at the running back position is Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We've brought him up more than a few times, I feel like, on this video. And I'm just going to say it again. We've been bringing it up. First of all, Jaylen Warren has kind of been outplaying him lately. The last 2 weeks, I feel like Jaylen Warren has been playing really well, especially last week against the Commanders. I thought he thoroughly outplayed Najee Harris on a per-carry basis, and he was more explosive. So that's first. So he's going to probably lose touches, lose carries. Now, that being said, the Steelers have ran the ball a ridiculous amount. Like against the Commanders, they ran the ball with running backs alone 38 times. So there's plenty to go around here. But Najee also and the Steelers in general face a ludicrous schedule at the end of the year. They play Baltimore twice, Cleveland twice, Cincinnati twice, which, by the way, they're the 7th best defense against the run this year, believe it or not. Philadelphia and Kansas City. They play literally, some of the best run defenses in the sport, top 5. So that's pure red. Like if you check the Yahoo schedule, it's like red all the way down the thing. So, and Najee's not exactly known for explosiveness, for taking limited touches and doing a lot with it. Considering a lot of these games have great offenses, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Philly, Kansas City, these are probably games where the Steelers are going to have to throw the ball more, which also takes more opportunity away from Najee and puts Warren on the field. And there's probably less opportunity for him to score a touchdown, which he's pretty reliant on as well. So Najee is a guy that I would definitely trade for a variety of reasons: competition, schedule, and game state. Nick Chubb is our third sell high at the running back position, our third sell high in general. Nick Chubb, mostly because of schedule. He plays Pittsburgh twice. He plays Kansas City. He plays Cincinnati, Denver, and Miami for the rest of the season. None of these defenses are easy, I would say. Chubb does play this week the Saints, which he should thrive. So I would actually think about, depending on when your trade deadline is, I would think about trading Chubb after this game. But when you look at it, he has yet to go over 10 points since his return to the NFL. He has looked a little bit slower, and he certainly has not been involved on third down or as a receiver. So his upside is limited, and given the matchups and given where the Browns are at as a team, they're not going to be probably winning a lot of these games. So Chubb is not a guy that I would really love to have on my team for the fantasy playoffs. I'd rather throw him in. His name is enticing. He is a very talented player from the past. Maybe he still has that left. That's at least what fantasy owners are going to think. That's why you trade him. The name value is there. The trade value is there. I'd get rid of him, throw him in a trade, get somebody else on your team. Maybe he's somebody that I would throw in with another player for an upgrade of a single player, something like that. Lamar Jackson is going to be the shocking sell high of the video. I usually throw out one each and every week because I kind of feel like I want to be different and I want to give you something contrarian. And I feel like Lamar is a good one. The reason being is obviously he's the best fantasy quarterback this season. He's the MVP. But there's a chance that Lamar does not perform the same entering the late November, December. First of all, he plays in Baltimore. Baltimore is not the prettiest place to play. He plays Pittsburgh twice, which is a defense that typically has played him extremely well. He plays Pittsburgh this week, I should say, and then he plays Pittsburgh down the road in Baltimore a little bit later in the year. He plays the Chargers the week after Pittsburgh. Not an easy matchup. They're actually the best scoring defense in football, and they're top 3 against fantasy quarterbacks. Philly is actually phenomenal on defense right now, and then he has a bye week, which also sucks. So there's a variety of reasons. So the next 3 weeks, he has a really tough schedule. So if you're going to sell him right now, because he's the MVP of the league right now. He just had an insane performance against Cincinnati. Everybody will want Lamar on their team, especially if they've got a loaded roster elsewhere. You can use Lamar as a chip to downgrade at quarterback and then upgrade somewhere else on your team, which in my opinion is always more important in fantasy. I'd rather have a weaker quarterback than weaker running backs or receivers. That's just my take. That's just my opinion. But Pittsburgh, the Chargers, the Eagles, the next 3 weeks. Then he has a bye, which sucks. Because if you're in the playoff run and race, you want him that week. You're going to have to get somebody else to play. And then in the fantasy playoffs, he does get a pretty good matchup with the Giants. But then in the playoffs, this is where I hate him. He plays Pittsburgh in the playoffs. If there's a game where Lamar does not give you an advantage over other quarterbacks at any point in the season, it's against Pittsburgh. So I would... just for that fact alone, it's not worth having Lamar on your team as opposed to what you could get for Lamar. You understand what I'm saying? Because he's not the advantage that him and Hurts and maybe Allen are, those type of guys, when he plays Pittsburgh, because it's just a really tough matchup. And then Houston after that, which is also a pretty tough matchup in my opinion. So in the fantasy playoffs, Pittsburgh right in that semifinal and Houston in the final, it doesn't really give you that Lamar boost that you would want to win your championship. So that's why I'd maybe look at maybe being the contrarian and selling Lamar, maybe for a running back or a receiver or a tight end, maybe even an elite tight end straight across or something like that. I don't know, just throwing something out there. And then our 5th and final sell high is going to be Joe Shiesty, Joe Burrow. So we talked about Lamar, we talked about Joe Burrow. I mean, Joe Burrow just had a phenomenal Thursday night football performance, like one to remember for sure, and they lost, and he is currently the 5th fantasy quarterback. He's QB5 in fantasy, which I think is probably his peak, to be honest. He doesn't run very much, and his stats right now from a passing perspective are perfect. They're very, very good, but I don't love Burrow for the rest of the season for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think he's kind of at his peak considering the performance he had against Baltimore. He doesn't play Baltimore again, unfortunately, until maybe the playoffs. He has a bye week during week 12. I want to get rid of guys that have bye weeks. He plays Pittsburgh. We've brought up Pittsburgh. He plays Tennessee, which is a good pass defense. He plays Cleveland, which he always sucks against. And then he plays Denver. He has one easy game remaining, Dallas. So I look at Burrow as a guy that's a pure passer, doesn't have a lot of rushing production, and he plays some of the best pass defenses in the NFL, including a matchup with Cleveland in the semifinals. This is like Lamar against Pittsburgh. Burrow always sucks against Cleveland. He always sucks against Cleveland. Checked how he played against Cleveland earlier this year, right? So I want to get rid of Burrow. I don't want to start Burrow in that game. I'd rather start Kyler Murray. I'd rather start Brock Purdy or somebody like that, honestly, than Joe Burrow in that week. So, like, and then he plays Denver in the finals, which is not a great matchup either. So I think Lamar and Burrow are the quarterbacks that I would be looking to sell. Those are my buy lows. Those are my sell highs. Remember, guys, sign up to OwnersBox this week. Now is the time. Use the code PP100. It's Mitch. Thanks for watching. Ask your questions in the comments. Peace.